pre-tenancy. With the Deregulation Act, a whole lot of stuff came in. And if you look at the market 20 years ago, you bought one of these tenancy agreements from W.H. Smith or whatever, and you made 20 copies of them, and there you went. There were no such things as how to rent guides and restrictions on deposits. Now there's a whole lot of stuff. The pre-tenancy setup is so important, and there are some key documents. So if you haven't served some of these, then you can't serve Section 21 notice. In other words, you have to pray that these tenants will fall into arrears so you can evict them. Because if you haven't served the how to rent guide, and be careful with this how to rent guide, because the how to rent guide gets changed by the government several times a year sometimes, and they don't warn you. So unless you belong to a group like us professional agents do, we get warned because our organization warns us. But I've had tenants who, when they applied for the property 3 weeks before they moved in, I served them with the how to rent guide. And then the government brought out the new how to rent guide the day before they moved in. Thank heavens I got notified so that I could serve them the new one, because otherwise the whole thing would have been invalid. The deposit is another big one. There are many landlords who have missed this deposit thing. You have to serve the how to rent guide. You have to serve the prescribed information around the deposit. There's several other requirements as well. So you have to really look at your deposit scheme requirements. There are strict timelines. There's like 30 days, and that's not from when the tenancy started. So you need to safeguard that deposit 30 days after the deposit was paid. Not the holding deposit, the proper deposit was paid. If the tenant moves in 3 weeks after the deposit was paid, you've only got 1 week to do the rest. You need to serve the certificate on them and make sure they know that you've done your side, and check those amounts, because you cannot, since the Deregulation Act, you cannot put more than 5 weeks rent into the deposit scheme. The deposit scheme will happily accept it, but you need to refund that balance to the tenant if you have made a mistake like that. And mistakes happen. The EPC is reasonably straightforward. The only thing is, a lot of landlords have got tenants in there for 20 years, whenever EPCs, I can't remember when EPCs came out, and they forgot to get an EPC for the property. So that EPC needs to be done. It doesn't need to be renewed if it expires during the tenancy. That's not a problem. But you need to prove that your property is an E or above. And let's hope this government doesn't bring in this C rubbish, because I don't know, a lot of our old properties are never going to pass a C. Never. So let's hope they keep it at an E or a D. A D I can live with, not a C. So you need to serve that valid EPC before the tenancy starts. You can't serve it a day after. Actually needs to be done before the viewing. So the tenant needs to know that before they sign up for it. The danger here is old tenancies. So keep an eye for old tenancies, because it's important that everything is in place. So document number 4 is you also need to serve an up-to-date gas certificate. Tip, do not leave this to the last minute, because if you know your tenant is moving in 3 days, don't then suddenly send a gas engineer around to go do the gas certificate, because his van might break down, his equipment might break down, he must get ill, then you're trying to find a new gas engineer. And if you don't have that gas certificate, you cannot let that tenant move. You need to just tell them, sorry, you can't move in, because otherwise you'll never be able to evict them using the Section 21. Make sure you include a copy of electrical certificate. It's not a requirement to serve the electrical certificate on the tenant before they move in, but it's just good practice. So give them an electrical certificate that you know is in date, it's passed everything. Make sure they sign for it, because then you know that you've done your thing. You've told them everything is safe in their property. They can't make accusation. Also, another good one to do is give them the head lease of the block of flats. Then they must adhere to the rules of that block of flats. No prams in the communal hallways, no hanging of the washing, no parking on certain bits. So they need to know what the rules are, because otherwise you'll get into trouble about your tenant's behavior And if you've served this on them, at least you've covered your side. Now I'm going to be cheeky and squeeze in the inventories here. Now it's not a legal requirement, but if you don't have a signed inventory at the beginning, then you don't have proof of the smoke and the carbon monoxide detectors being in place. Inventory records all that. And if you do a proper check-in, you've got proof and people sign. It could be a cause for claims from tenants making false allegations, not being able to claim from the deposit,